Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. We'd like to urge those of you who haven't yet done so, to sign our online petition for an inquiry into the BBC and Channel 4's coverage of Lewis Hamilton and Abu Dhabi. A link has been provided in the description. If you are on X, then please repost our tweet. Thank you. In our previous video titled, Lewis Hamilton Bias Exposed as He Dominates Australian GP Headlines, we set out how the Ferrari debutant had dominated the media coverage throughout the weekend. Unfortunately, some critics with a tenuous grasp of the English language, who either failed to read the full title or watch the full video, complained, so we are doing this follow-up to reaffirm our researched conclusion. We know that Sir Lewis and his teammate started from 8th and 7th on the grid respectively. The debutant finishing 0.218 seconds off an 8-year veteran renowned for his one-lap speed, was quite an achievement. This blew up one of the pillars that the lamestream media had based their untethered criticisms of the transfer on, when it was announced. It was hard to imagine his younger self been happy with that, was the worst spin our good friends at planetf1.com could put on it. As if they knew better than the GOAT himself how he felt about it. But hang on a minute, when he made his debut at this very track 18 years ago, he was 0.262 seconds off his double world champion teammate, so what the heck, Planet F1 know him better than he knows himself. We have already demonstrated that the lamestream media are encouraged to concoct whatever propaganda they like about him, because they have nothing to lose when disproved, they simply look for the next one. So, now that he has not turned out to be significantly slower than Charles, time to move on to the next concoction. The chaotic race also ended with the GOAT and his teammate in 10th and 8th respectively, so it was a disappointing outing for Ferrari. However, the fact that Sir Lewis, who finished 10th, got the most headline coverage, reaffirms our earlier report that he had dominated the pre-race media coverage. As you can see from the main sports page for the official F1 broadcaster Sky Sports, and the British Broadcasting Corporation, that is doing the most to undermine the legacy of the Black British champion, Lewis Hamilton is the only F1 driver whose thumbnail is featured on both. Is that not next-level dominance, when those who love to hate him, place his image above their preferred candidates? The BBC did carry a feature titled, Copybook Victory as Norris and McLaren Come Through Chaos Unscathed, on their main sports page, but they did not accompany it with a thumbnail or image. Tellingly, their most prominent feature, which was titled, Hamilton's First Ferrari Race, A Big Crash Course, was accompanied by a thumbnail of the driver who finished a lowly 10th behind his teammate. Over at Sky, who also happened to be the main broadcaster for football and golf, the Hamilton mania was even more pronounced. With the BBC, you had to scroll past the less prominent Norris headline, before getting to the most prominent Hamilton one. However, with Sky, the more prominent headline, Hamilton, Ferrari debut went a lot worse than I thought it would, which was the only one to be highlighted as an exclusive, came before any references to Norris, the race winner and championship favourite. On MSN, that we have shown is the platform of choice for those wishing to disseminate unhinged anti-Lewis propaganda, their homepage featured the headline, Lewis Hamilton radio message annoyed Ferrari boss Fred Vasseur as the lead thumbnail, with another Hamilton article, Lewis Hamilton's frustration clear on radio message as he tells Ferrari where blame lies, alongside. And of course, he was the headline for our friends at Planet F1. So, you can see that a Hamilton story accompanied with an image was the order of the day for all F1 media. It was rather amusing for us to read Benson's report of how the champion that he hates so much fared in the race. Especially the bit where the GOAT was describing how well he had been negotiating the wet spell on slick tires, before the rain got harder and they had to make the stop for treaded tires, which ended up dropping him down the order. Of course, that was unfortunate, and Ferrari could do with better weathermen, but one can just imagine what was going through the BBC journalist's mind, as the Brit was doing better than the Dutch he had previously boasted would be able to use his excellence to fare well in wet conditions. If Benson had to admit that his renowned Dutch rain master slipped up at one point, you can bet your bottom euro that if Sir Lewis had slipped up at any point on the track, he would have been all over it like a grand wizard at a clan rally. It is always amusing seeing all these folks looking desperately for someone that they can allocate a Hamilton skill set to, a bit like when Mercedes tried to label George the Tyre Whisperer. The F1 media, led by Sky and the BBC, want nothing more than to find a white driver from any nationality to dethrone the GOAT, and this is very much reflected in their output. But unfortunately for them, that is easier said than done. The underlying message which was buried in all the gloating over his 10th place finish, is that at certain times during the race, he showed that the skill set that made him the GOAT was far from diminishing, and it was only a team misjudgment that let him down. Having come to understand what he is doing when he complains about his tires during a race, we were quietly confident that he will do well in the wet. When he suggested in his post-qualifying interview that he was concerned about the projected rain because that will be his first experience of it in the Ferrari. Well, he came through that with shining colors, and we fully expect the team will step up their weather prediction system. It was also clear that the Ferrari was not properly hooked up for the track, but with every passing moment, the GOAT will be able to help them grow like only he can. Furthermore, we could see how he went round acknowledging every member of his team as they were preparing for qualifying, and we can understand how he did what he did at Mercedes that caused Nico to do what he did. All in all, the finishing position might have been disappointing, but then, into each life some rain must fall, so better that it has happened now. On the flip side, it was refreshing to see Norris boasting about being the favourites, as he was egged on by the reporters. You can see that one coming a mile off. The fact that Benson was gleefully reporting that Max and George were talking as if they knew that the McLaren will take some beating, is just the icing on the cake. At least they have enough sense to heap as much pressure on Lando as favourite, because we all know that he can't cash the cheque that his mouth is writing, but never mind. Melbourne was more luck than design because that is what happens in chaotic races like Brazil last year. The best or worst that the 6-time world champion driver, with 106 victories and 66 fastest laps, that now writes for the likes of Planet F1 could say, was that a pacificism had crept into the GOAT's driving, on his first Ferrari outing that happened during a rain-soaked session, in which he was the only one not to go for a spin. Bloody niching, or bloody astonishing if you prefer, but this is what LHDS looks like in 4K. Sir Lewis has shown that he was the best in the wet, and not far off his renowned one-lap teammate. Fred is convinced the Ferrari is much closer to the McLaren than Melbourne indicated, so bring on China. Forza Ferrari.